Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jake Wynn from the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, coming at you live from the Clara Barton Missing Soldiers Office Museum in Washington, D.C. We have another live program for you all today. I am joined by my friend, Pete, from the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. He is in the exhibits at Seminary Ridge. How are you doing today, Pete?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here.
Excellent. We are glad to have you. So we are broadcasting live today. This is an exciting part of what has become the interpretive strategies for both of our institutions. We've been doing a lot of live programming over the last year as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of you watching with us today probably have seen some of our other live programming that we've done, both for us at the Civil War Medicine Museum and for Seminary Ridge Museum as well. Thank you out there so much for supporting us all through this difficult time in the for the entirety of the world, but especially for the museum field as well. We've all been working our way through this crisis of the last year, and it's thanks to all of you out there, the viewers, watching and supporting these videos, donating to the museums, becoming members of our institutions, who have really done an amazing job of sustaining us and continuing to allow us to do the work that we are able to do in a digital setting right now, but also as we begin reopening. Both of our institutions have begun that reopening stage. We're at different levels of that, but it's exciting that we are moving back in that direction. And we have a topic today that kind of resembles a little bit of that, kind of getting towards normalcy. We're going to talk a little bit today with Pete about the story at Seminary Ridge, not about the heat of battle, but about the aftermath and the striving to recover some normalcy and to move back towards everyday life, to recover from the horrors of a Civil War battle and a building that was used as a Civil War hospital. We're going to be diving into some stories of that today. So not necessarily the 3 days or immediate aftermath of the Battle of Gettysburg, but the long-standing consequences and that striving again to recover some level of normalcy. So that's going to be our program today. If you do enjoy these programs that both of our institutions have been doing over the past 12 months now, you can assist us by becoming a member of our museums. We're going to be dropping some links into the chat section here in just a second. You can go to our websites and you can become a member or donate to our museums, and that allows us to continue doing these sorts of programs. Allows us to upgrade our technology, to continue to share these important stories that are more important now than ever before. And so we thank all of you who have become members, who have donated to our institutions over the past year and in the years before that. Thank you for sustaining us and allowing us to continue doing this work. We do have folks tuning in from all over the place today. We've got our first comment came from Kuwait today. We've got Kenhorst, Pennsylvania, Springfield, Illinois. We've got a nurse watching, appropriate for today's topic. We've got Libertytown, Maryland, Central Florida, Pittsburgh, Bel Air, Kansas, Ellicott City, Maryland, Newark, New York. Got a happy St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Thanks for tuning in with us. Stafford, Virginia, Hollywood, Maryland, Taunton, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Dallas, Texas, Orlando, Florida. Thank you all so much for letting us know where y'all are watching from. Continue to add to the comment section. And if you have any questions or comments for myself or for Pete, who's going to be doing most of the presenting today, feel free to drop those into the comments. We'll bring that into the conversation. Pete can't see those questions, just so you all know, but I will be kind of the moderator for the online comment section discussion. So feel free to talk amongst yourselves, send us any questions or comments you might have, and I'll be happy to bring those into the broadcast. So with all of that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Pete now to inside the exhibits there at the Seminary Ridge Museum to do today's program.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. So As many people probably know, if they've watched the videos that we've done previously, this building where I'm standing right now is the original Lutheran Seminary building here in Gettysburg, constructed in 1832. And from the morning of July 1st, 1863, all the way through September 16th, this building was used as a hospital. Early on, it's many of the men that are coming off the battlefield, the men of the 1st Division of the 1st Corps, the 3rd Division of the 1st Corps, that are coming into this building. And most of the serious surgeries are being done probably around July 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, as the Confederate Army retreats, the Union Army retakes this building, start to gather people, wounded soldiers from the battlefield, and start to treat the men that are already in here. So probably a lot of action, a lot of strain and stress on personnel is happening during those days. But as Jake said, what I want to talk about is sort of the period from about the middle of July until the middle of September. And by this time, a lot of that intense action has died down. And in fact, by July 22nd, there have been 11,000 wounded soldiers that have been evacuated from Gettysburg. That's one of those statistics that sort of gets left out, is that there is this rapid evacuation on the rail system between July 7th and July 22nd. So the men that are left here from July 22nd through the last wounded soldier leaves Camp Letterman, which is the big general hospital out on York Road, right around the time that Lincoln gives the Gettysburg Address. These are men that are too fragile to be moved. They could have evacuated them out, but as Jonathan Letterman, the medical director of the Army of the Potomac, is saying, that it's very important for men to regain their strength and be well enough to be moved and to not move them too quickly. So those are the kind of stories that I'm gonna talk about here today. And I want to start by talking specifically about the 4 Confederate officers that are in this building. They are Isaac Trimble, James Kemper, Robert Powell, and Henry Kidd Douglas. And there are a lot of stories about these guys, and people are coming into the hospital to visit them, to see them, to kind of gaze upon them. And there are some really interesting stories that come out of those interactions. And the first story, which is I'm going to lead with what's maybe the most interesting story, is the story of the almost knife fight that breaks out in this building. And it's told by the chaplain of the 28th Virginia, a man named Peter Tinsley, Episcopal minister who remains behind here in Gettysburg as the Confederate Army retreats. And Peter Tinsley spends a lot of time walking around the battlefield. He goes out, he's at Black Horse Tavern, he's at Bream's Mill, and he spends some time here in the hospital. One quote, and Jake, I didn't even tell you this one, he has a lot to say about female nurses. He calls them she-doctors, and is very sort of looks down upon them from his lofty perch of Southern manhood, that there could be women that are helping out and performing medical tasks. He specifically calls out Dr. Mary Walker, and has a lot to say, a lot of mean things to say about her. But he comes in here one day and he is visiting the room where James Kemper, who's one of the brigade commanders in George Pickett's division, Kemper is here, and he is sharing a room with Robert Powell of the 5th Texas. And Tinsley tells the story, and I'm gonna read it just because his description of this story is so great. First of all, he says about Robert Powell, he is tall, well-formed, has a natural ease and grace, is a gentleman and a soldier, every inch a hero. And he goes on to say, a few days before Tinsley's visit, Powell wished to pass some ladies from General Kemper's room to General Trimble next door. And they were guarded at this point by the Pennsylvania militia, who were doing provost duties here in Gettysburg, trying to keep the order. and Trimble was similarly guarded. The guards refused. The wounded colonel draws his pocket knife, knocks aside the guns of the militia with one hand, and at the point of the blade, escorts the ladies by. They were stupefied by fright, the militia. They did not like the ideas of having throats cut. Next day, the colonel received the present of a very nice knife. So that's just one of the many stories that is coming out of here. As I said earlier, a lot of people are telling stories, observations about what's going on, especially with those Confederate officers. Isaac Trimble, many people who are watching this probably know that Isaac Trimble is one of the, if not the most cantankerous Confederate general in Robert E. Lee's army. It's probably a trade-off between Trimble and Jubal Early. But Trimble is here, and he is originally housed down in town, treated in town with a family of Southern sympathizers, and the Union commanders don't like the good treatment that Trimble is getting, so they bring him up here into the Seminary Hospital and pretty much place him sort of in general population. He does get his own room, but he is really, really angry about this, and he decides that he's going to go on a hunger strike. And one of the female nurses, female attendants here, a woman named Martha Eller from the Patriot Daughters of Lancaster, says that, well, General Trimble would order the best of everything cooked, and if it did not please him, send it back to the kitchen. I was there one day when his dinner was returned. It consisted of nice fried ham and eggs with mashed potatoes and onions, but it did not please him. I don't know why. Sounds pretty good to me. Norris, who was the cook, asked what he should do. I suggested letting him wait until his appetite improved, which was done. No other dinner was supplied.
So yeah,
go ahead.
That's what a good account. This thinking of food and some of the going back to talking about Letterman and the system of kind of supply for these hospitals and their establishment. We do have a question here, Pete, that I think would be a good time to address this right now. And this comes from Jan. Did the Union Army continue to supply this hospital post-battle?
Yes. There are supplies that are coming in a lot, but a lot of stuff is coming in from the relief commissions. Patriot Daughters are bringing food. Sanitary Commission, Christian Commission have very large presences here in Gettysburg and are supplying. But a lot of times the female attendants are the ones that are doing the cooking. We know that Mary Ziegler, who's the seminary matron, is downstairs in her kitchen cooking away down in where our museum shop is today. And then there's also an account from Sally Myers, a resident of Gettysburg, who talks about the big ovens that are set up in the grove of trees about where our parking lot is today. And there's a lot of cooking being done there. So that's one of the things. I'm glad you brought it up, Jake, is that this takes a lot to operate, a lot to run this hospital. There's a lot of moving parts. It's not just wounded soldiers and doctors performing amputations. There's food, there's dressing of wounds, there's cleaning. There's a lot to do to make this place run efficiently.
And just one other question that I have, and I know I can let you get back to your program part of this, but
go ahead.
Thinking about this. Can you speak a little bit more about the Patriot Daughters? I've not heard of this organization before.
Yeah, so the Patriot Daughters are a relief organization from Lancaster. Their president is a woman named Rosina Hubley. And believe it or not, I can see just past where the camera is sitting, we have a letter that Rosina Hubley wrote to Governor Andrew Curtin July 4th of 1863, saying, we have supplies ready to go to Gettysburg. Tell us where to send them. And there's a great account that's written by Martha Eller. She's the one that writes this account about Trimble. And they eventually travel here from Lancaster. They get to the Susquehanna River and they find that the bridge has been burned. It's burned to keep Jubal Early's division from crossing over into Lancaster. And they finally make their way here to Gettysburg. They start performing duties in Christ Lutheran Church, and then they go back to Lancaster and then come back again to Gettysburg and then start serving here at the Seminary Hospital. And the book is called Hospital Scenes After the Battle of Gettysburg, and it's a really great account. It's available on Internet Archive, a really great window into the work that women are doing here in Gettysburg. And if you go to downtown Lancaster today, if you go around sort of the central square there in Lancaster, I think it's a Marriott hotel there. It used to be a Marriott, but anyway, there's a big Civil War monument right in the center there. And the money for that was raised by the Patriot Daughters of Lancaster after the war.
Awesome. That's a fascinating group. I'm gonna dive in and read those accounts. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
So back over to you, Pete.
Yeah. So the other person, the other Confederate commander officer that's in here is a man named Henry Kidd Douglas. And he was on Stonewall Jackson's staff when Stonewall Jackson was alive, and then is serving on the staff here at Gettysburg of Edward Johnson. He's wounded on, I believe it's either really late on July 2nd or really early on July 3rd, and he ends up here. And he's sort of a heartthrob, if there is one during the Civil War, and so he's very popular here with some of the ladies that are coming to see him. And he writes especially though about the Daughters of Charity, and you can see behind me here. I hope you can see that we have a model here of one of the Daughters of Charity. It's a religious order from Emmitsburg, Maryland, that come here to help nurse the wounded soldiers. And Henry Kidd Douglas specifically cites one of these nuns who is very very beautiful and takes time to speak to him, is actually from Mississippi and has a brother in the Confederate Army. So they draw a connection over that. And Kidd Douglas talks about how his room is set up, that somebody has brought him a really nice chair to sit in, and this female nun has helped put up some drapes to make the room look really nice. So I think that angers a lot of Northerners and a lot of Unionists who come here through the hospital, that Henry Kidd Douglas is receiving such good treatment. But I believe that this is kind of, as the hospital is starting to empty out and space starts to open up, that you start to see, one or two or three people to a room rather than so many people here kind of crammed in wherever they can go. Henry Kidd Douglas also meets the son of Samuel Simon Schmucker, who's the president here at the seminary. And Samuel Schmucker Jr. comes and meets Henry Kidd Douglas and gives him a copy of Les Miserables. And Kidd Douglas is very, very appreciative of that he has a lot of time to read. So it gives a window sort of into what's going on here. It gets at that idea that it's not sort of this kind of massive emergency situation that's going on. It's sort of like just the everyday life of this hospital. I'll stop there if there's anything to add, but I have another story that kind of gets more at that too.
No, that's a kind of 2 points to add in. My colleague John Lustria, I believe, is dropping in some links. So we do have a link to the book that you referenced, the hospital scenes after the Battle of Gettysburg. So if you want to read more about that, I know I will be after the program is over. And also to note, I failed to do this at the beginning of the show, is that we do have some other videos that we have recorded together since the beginning of the pandemic that do explore more of the emergency situation during and immediately after the battle. So if you want to know more of this story, of course, go visit the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. But we also have these videos available online. I'll drop those links in here as well. So back to you, Pete.
Yeah. So we recently uncovered a great collection of letters written by a soldier named Franklin Fayette Pratt. And Franklin Pratt is a soldier in the 76th New York. He hails from Homer, New York, which is up in Cortland County. And he does not fight with his regiment out north of the regiment is fighting north of the railroad cut, not too far from where I'm standing on the morning of July 1st. But Franklin Pratt had become ill with malarial fever on the march up, so he's not fighting, and he's actually dedicated as being a nurse, and he serves first down in the courthouse hospital right there on Baltimore Street, right immediately after the battle. But as that hospital is closed, he comes up here to the Seminary Hospital. And that's another important thing to consider, is that as time goes on, getting further and further away from the battle, these hospitals are becoming consolidated, and you start to have just fewer hospitals until it basically is just the Seminary Hospital here and Camp Letterman out on York Road. So that's how Franklin Pratt ends up here, and he writes almost every day, or at least every third day, to his parents in Homer, New York. And it's great because it's just, again, it's that everyday stuff. He's talking about the weather. It's really hot. It's really stifling heat here. He talks about the way in which the hospital here is set up, that there are many men in the building, but then there's also tents outside. And if you look at that very famous photo that's taken by Matthew Brady of this building right after not right after the battle, but about 2 weeks after the battle, the one with the guy sitting on the fence. If you zoom in front of the seminary building, you can see some of the tents coming down the ridge. So we know that there were a bunch of tents set up here on the campus, and then there were also soldiers in here. And he, first of all, he also writes about seeing the two rebel generals, the colonel and the major. So Kemper, Trimble, Kid Douglas, and Powell. He said, they talk with our men, and some of them will own up that they are in the wrong. He writes about how the wounds are dressed. The wounds are dressed twice a day, morning and evening regular, either by the doctors or others detailed for that word. I have dressed wounds considerable and can do it as well as any of them, but I don't make a practice of doing it, for I have as much as I can do without. Every one of the wounded men is now, as a general thing, fully supplied. So again, that gets back at that question about supplies, that by the time that Franklin Pratt is writing that, and he's writing that on August 10th, the supplies have been coming in, and everything is pretty well supplied. Coming in through donations and through those commissions. But he also writes that about the tents being down the ridge, and how they're really kind of stifling hot. And when he first comes up here, the Confederates and Union soldiers are in the same tent. And sometimes there are 6 or 8 men to a tent, whereas they were really, I think he says they could only supposed to hold 4. But as time goes on and more men are being evacuated from Gettysburg here, they separate the Union and the Confederate soldiers, and they get those tents back to where it should be, about two men to a tent. But he talks about he's on duty for 6 hours, from 6 o'clock at night until 12 o'clock at night. One night, Franklin Pratt's writing a letter to his parents. He says, it's about 10 o'clock and I'm on duty. I'm sitting here with the guys. They're laughing, they're joking, and they are generally in good spirits. Although he does admit that one of those soldiers is going to have a secondary amputation, where they're going to have to amputate a second time because the wound is not healing correctly. So again, just that sort of that slice of life that is occurring within these walls.
So Pete, one question from me, and then I have another question from
Sure.
Dan here. My question is, you bring up Camp Letterman, and, and we have another video about Camp Letterman, and I'm curious as to why so many of the hospitals and the makeshift hospitals get shut down in Gettysburg. Why is it that the seminary continues to be used in addition to Camp Letterman?
Yeah, and that is an interesting question, and I have not really been able to uncover a good answer to that. It is a stout building. It's sort of what you would expect. Franklin Pratt talks about the really good air up here, which may have had something to do with it. In fact, if you stand up in the cupola, which you can visit today, you can actually see the site of Camp Letterman. And it's interesting to think about, to look at the topography of town. The town of Gettysburg is sort of in a bowl, bounded on the east and the west side by ridgelines. So if you think about the prevailing theory in the 19th century that fresh air is what helps not ward off disease, but bad air causes disease, and you want an ample supply of fresh air, you want that to be where you're up most high. So I think that might have something to do with it. That first of all, you have this building, you have a good grounds for setting up those tents, but then you also have that really nice air, prevailing breeze coming from the west. So that's the best answer I can come up with. But I don't know. I have not yet been able to uncover anything written that talks about that reasoning.
Yeah, that's a great point, Pete. I can definitely see that. And having been up to the cupola, which highly recommend, it is an amazing experience to see. But yeah, that the dominating kind of medical theory of the day in the mid 19th century is that kind of miasmatic medicine, the idea that diseases spread through the air, and being up high and getting this fresh air is something that is crucial to 19th century medical thought about what is going to help soldiers and people recover from illnesses or from serious wounds and infections. That sounds like, I hadn't thought of that. I think that's a really good suggestion for why that might be. The other question that I have here is from Jan. Thank you for submitting questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them into the comments section. She asks, did the families of wounded soldiers begin to arrive in the aftermath of the battle?
Great question, and you're anticipating where I'm going with this, Jan. So thank you. Yes, there are families that do show up, and actually one of the best documented visits is the family of Lieutenant Colonel George McFarland, who is commander of the 151st Pennsylvania here on the first day of the battle. McFarland is an educator, and he is actually going to be the patient that remains in this building the longest. He's the last one to leave on September 16th. And his family comes and visits. His wife, Addie, his 3-year-old son, Horace, and his infant daughter, Emma, come, and he writes, and as I was preparing for this program, I was rereading McFarland's diary. Addie McFarland comes and stays here for 7 weeks, helping to care for her husband, helping to care for other men within this building. So she comes from Juniata County, and she basically stays. And it's interesting because when she leaves, he gets really sort of, you can sense this change in his writings, that he gets really lonely and that he gets a little bit more despondent, and he leaves about a week after she does and heads home. But that week, you can sense again in his writings, is really difficult for him. He had gotten used to having his wife here. There are other family members that come. There's one of the accounts that I have seen is the mother of a soldier named Andrew Gregg Tucker, who's a lieutenant in the 142nd Pennsylvania. He actually, unfortunately, dies in this building on July 4th and is buried first outside in the garden right outside this building. But his mother and their church leader and the president of Bucknell University, where Tucker had recently graduated, the three of them come down to remove his body and take it back to Lewisburg. So there are those great stories. A little bit more about George McFarland. So he probably provides the best window into what is going on in this building on a regular basis between July 1st and September 16th, because he is in here for that entire time. And luckily for us, he is also a very prolific diarist. He keeps a diary almost every single day, and he was also writing letters home. He recognizes what the role that he and his men have played in the Battle of Gettysburg, and he is trying as almost as quickly as possible to record everything. So it's become an invaluable tool for understanding the ins and outs and the day-to-day of what goes on in this building during those months. He's in a lot of pain. He is wounded on July 1st, about 20 paces off the northwest corner of this building. He's dragged into the building, into the north end of the building, as the Confederates are coming in the south end of this building. And he is a prisoner until the Union Army retakes the building on July 5th. And he says that he is lying on the floor in a pool of his own blood for 3 days without food, water, or medical attention, because the Confederates have taken the medical supplies for them. His right leg is amputated below the knee on July 3rd, and his left ankle, while it's saved, is shattered. And he writes in throughout the month of August and into September. First of all, he writes about how hot it is in this building, that during the day it's really hot, and at night it is really cold. And he writes about the pain. I think it's August 24th. He writes that his pain is as bad as ever. It's taking a really long time to heal. And in fact, it's never going to fully heal. This is the pain that he is going to suffer for the rest of his life. He has a bout of diarrhea sometime in late August, which adds to his discomfort, adds to his troubles. And for about a week, he is the only patient in this building. That week between a little over a week between September 7th and September 16th, he's the only person in this building. And he writes about Samuel Schmucker, the president of the seminary, the elder, coming and talking to him and sitting with him. And he actually, for a while, he says, well, if I stayed, it wouldn't be such a bad thing, because then I could learn theology. But he does talk about a jollification, as he calls it, that takes place in this building one night on the night of September. Well, it happens on the night of September 2nd. I am the only one on my floor, except some noisy, drunken attendants and doctors. Last night, they took a general jollification, a regular drink, in which rumor says all or nearly all were engaged, even many of the patients downstairs waiting for transportation. Of course, they annoyed me, and mentioning it to Dr. Riley, he remarked, they felt jolly, wanted fun.
A story worthy of St. Patrick's Day.
It certainly is. Yeah.
I have a good question here from one of our great supporters at the museum, and this is a good question. I hadn't thought of this particular aspect of the hospital here at Seminary Ridge, but she asks, what's the closest source of fresh water for the seminary?
Excellent question.
Yeah.
So we do know that there were pumps. There were wells that were dug behind the building here. On the west side of the building, there were probably 3 pumps, one for each of the buildings up here. There may have been multiple ones for the seminary building itself, but we know where the other 2 buildings here on the campus during the battle are the Schmucker House, home of Samuel Schmucker, and the Krauth House, home of Charles Krauth. Schmucker House is south of us, Krauth House is north of us, but those were the 3 buildings on the ridge. Up until a few years ago, we knew we could see exactly where the Schmucker well was, because it was under the road, and the road would kind of crater a little bit during the summer, and you could see the depression. And about 3 years ago, they fixed that. Sort of unfortunate, because you used to be able to point out that was where the well was. We also know that there was most certainly a well behind this building. Hugh Ziegler, who is 10 years old, lives in the building with his family, recalls seeing his mother, Mary, on the first day of the battle at the well pumping water for the wounded soldiers. And in fact, we have the pump handle on display right now. So being that there was a well for the Schmucker House, a well for the main building, I'm making an educated guess that there was also one for the Krauth House a little bit up the ridge. So those are the supplies of fresh water that are being used within this building.
Excellent. So we do have some other great questions here.
Yeah, keep them coming.
I want to just to see, Pete, if you have any other aspects that you wanted to touch on before we get into questions.
No, I'm happy to jump right into questions. I've told my stories.
Excellent. So before we get questions, I do have an amusing comment that I want to add in. We have Christine watching from Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
Ooh.
Thanks for tuning in with us today, Christine. And she mentions that your background would make quite the background on Zoom.
You know what? I have really good images of all of the backgrounds here in the museum. So there are 4 of these dioramas set up that show the building at different points. And there's one that is the wounded soldiers, July 1st through 4th. And I have used that as a Zoom background from time to time just to grab people's attention. But thank you, Christine. I'm glad we're thinking on the same wavelength here.
And we also have a viewer watching from Oslo in Norway as well. So broadcasting across the world. So
excellent.
Fantastic. From David Smith, were there any female doctors or were they all males?
Well, the only female doctor that I know of that is documented as being here at Gettysburg is Dr. Mary Walker. And we know that she comes here a couple of days after the battle, and that she's serving. I think it's the second. For some reason, the Second Corps Field Hospital is sticking out in my head. But as far as we know, she's not up here at the seminary. But 99.8 or 9% of the surgeons that are working here are males.
All right, we did have some questions relating to prisoner of war camps, and there's some comments back and forth about Point Lookout. Yep. It's not directly in the comment section, but it's kind of related. And can you maybe talk about some of the patients, the Confederate patients? What happens when they are moved out of the seminary?
Yeah, I believe that Kemper and Douglas end up at Johnson's Island, prisoner of war camp. And I'm not exactly sure, I forget where Trimble ends up. And so the Confederates are shipped off. Now, Trimble and Kemper and Henry Kidd Douglas are all paroled eventually or exchanged. And I'm not sure how many end up at Point Lookout. I keep seeing Johnson's Island show up in a lot of these these reports. That's another rabbit hole that I have to go down someday, is to really look at where the different Confederate soldiers end up. I know where the officers end up, but I'm not sure where the rank and file are ending up.
Okay, another question here from Jan. Thank you, Jan, so much for all the great questions today. She brings up Chimborazo Hospital in Richmond and says that it was organized by state. Did the same thing happen at the seminary or at Camp Letterman?
I have not seen that here.
So maybe from some of the primary sources you were speaking of earlier, are there any conversations or anything written down about, any ways that they did organize patients, or were they kind of just scattered around the hospital?
I think by the time that it becomes a general, and so administratively, it's the Seminary Hospital turns from a field hospital into a general hospital, probably sometime in mid-July. And that is when you start to see soldiers from all different corners of the Army of the Potomac, and even some of those soldiers from the Army of Northern Virginia end up here. I believe that earlier, if you look at what is prescribed for what's supposed to be happening between July 1st and about the middle of July, it's really a hospital for the men of the First Corps. You see men from the 1st Division and the 3rd Division coming here and ending up in the hospital. So at that point, it really is structured in terms of the units of the Army that these men are in. But I have not seen a structure written up for what's going on when it is a general hospital, besides the fact that you're separating Union and Confederate soldiers. Those Franklin Pratt letters where he talks about the tents, he doesn't. I didn't see him make a distinction about what is going on in terms of states or even units.
All right. Question from Dan, and we mentioned this a little bit. We can get into it a little bit more specifically. Where did captured Confederates get treated? Were they treated in these same hospitals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when the Confederate Army leaves, they do leave doctors here, and there are Confederate hospitals that are still are out towards the west of town, and south and southwest and northwest of town. As the hospitals start to get consolidated, you start to see them coming into these general hospitals like Letterman, like the hospital here at the seminary. And in some cases, the Confederate doctors are still the ones that are helping to treat them. There's a big debate among the nursing staff, the female nursing staff, over whether or not they want to aid and treat Confederate soldiers. Some women say, well, at this point, they're all just wounded soldiers. Some say no, that they're I think it's the 2nd Corps Field Hospital. There are groups of Confederate soldiers, and they're segregated, and the female nurses don't want to go and help the Confederate soldiers there. So, but as the Confederates leave somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 or so wounded soldiers here, and then they take a lot of them with them. 17-mile long wagon train that goes from here down to Williamsport, Maryland, to take these soldiers back to Virginia.
Relating to the kind of medical personnel working, we have a question here, 2 questions here from Denise. The first one asks, how did medical personnel, civilian nurses cope with the building being in the midst of the battle while tending to wounded and performing operations? I will recommend the video that we did with Cody Aish from the Seminary Ridge Museum about the building being used on July 3rd, specifically during the battle. That has been posted in the comments above, Denise. So if you want to go check that video out after this, it goes into detail on that. But there's a second question here that I'll throw your way, Pete, which is, are there any reports of anyone, patients or doctors / nurses, being killed or wounded while in the seminary?
So I haven't seen anything about nurses or doctors being killed or wounded. The building is being hit with artillery fire. There's a battery of Confederate artillery at the southeast corner of the building, and Union counter battery fire from Cemetery Hill is hitting the building. And we know that there are some close calls. George McFarland talks about getting out of a bed right and just or lying back down in the nick of time, and watching a cannonball go over his head. We also have another story of another soldier who leaves his bedroom and goes into the hallway because of the fire is so intense, and he comes back and there's a cannonball in his bed where he just had been. But from what I have seen, nobody actually gets hurt or gets hit by any of that. The other thing that occurs is that as a result of that cannon fire, a group of men, and I've seen numbers. Sarah Broadhead, who's another nurse here, says it's hundreds of wounded men. I'm not sure if it was exactly that many, go into the cellar of this building below what's now the first floor. And that's where they're safe from the cannon fire. Well, the basement floods during the rain after the battle, and these men are in just a few inches of water, but they can't pull themselves out of the basement, and they're gonna drown. Now, Sarah Broadhead says that they were able to save all of them, but there are some other accounts, maybe not as noteworthy or as reputable, that say that some of the men did die of drowning. So that sort of answers that question.
Yeah, and another battle-related question here from Timothy, asking if any particular unit placed its surgeons at the seminary on July 1st.
It's probably men from the 1st Division of the 1st Corps of the Army of the Potomac. We know that the building is designated a field hospital by Dr. George New of the 7th Indiana, who's acting as medical director of the division. And it seems as though the building was meant to be the 1st Corps, 1st Division, 1st Corps field hospital. Now, by the end of the day, there are soldiers from the 3rd Division that are Rowley's, Doubleday or Rowley's division, that are coming in here to the building, and that there are surgeons like Amos Blakesley from the 151st Pennsylvania who stay behind and are treating soldiers in this building. So between the 1st and the 5th, at least, it's a lot of 1st Corps, 1st Division, or 1st Corps surgeons operating in here.
And we're going to take 2 more questions, and then we're gonna call it a day. If you do have any other questions here, feel free to drop those in. Myself, our staff at the museum, in the Civil War Medicine Museum, and I'm sure Pete would be happy to answer questions as well in the comments, and actually drop some answers in there for you. First one comes from Richard, and Richard, thank you for sending in some stars during this program. Support the museum that way. He asks, did the nurses have their own quarters in hospital or nearby? Have you come across where the nurses may have been living during this time?
Well, some of them are coming up from their homes every day. I know Sarah Broadhead talks about going home and coming back up, and she lives about a quarter mile away. The Patriot Daughters of Lancaster are very concerned about making sure that they bring everything that they need, and that they also find a place to stay, so they're not a burden on the already overtaxed resources of the town. They are able to secure some lodging right across the street from Christ Lutheran Church on Chambersburg Street, and that's where they set up their headquarters. But you look out at what's going on at Camp Letterman, there are specific tents that are set up for the attendants and the nurses to stay. That's probably a similar thing that's going on here. The Ziegler family, who I'm referencing throughout the talk, the matron and the steward of the seminary, they returned back here after fleeing during the first day's fighting, and they say that the doctors clear 2 rooms for them. So now you've got 7 people, in fact, living solely in 2 rooms, the 2 available rooms that are here in the hospital.
All right, and our final question comes from Rex. Rex asks about the soldiers who died at the seminary. Were they all interred at the National Cemetery? And do you have any count or any idea of a count of how many of the patients there actually died while on the seminary grounds?
The number that I have is 68. 68 soldiers died here in the building, 66 Union and 2 Confederate soldiers. It's tough to know if there were more than that, because the record books that we have, it doesn't cover necessarily July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. It's really only after the Union Army retakes the building. So we're not really you know, what goes on in the days of the battle is a little bit murkier than what's going on once things sort of get under control here. Some of the soldiers are buried. We have two accounts: Andrew Greg Tucker, who I referenced earlier, and Robert Cummins, who's the colonel of the 142nd Pennsylvania. Both of them are buried right out front in the garden of the seminary, and both of their bodies are removed and taken home. There are burial pits back behind the building. If you look at the Elliott burial map, there are burial pits behind the seminary here. Those have all been disinterred, likely brought to the National Cemetery. So long story short, there are no grave sites around here. Some of the wounded, some of the dead are taken home, but there are some, that are today interred in the National Cemetery.
All right, thank you all so much for those great questions. I saw we have had some come in. Afterwards, we'll get to those questions after we are off air. We'll answer those questions in the comments section for you all. So for folks who are interested in, have heard great things about your museum there, Pete, and want to come visit you, what are the details about coming and visiting the Seminary Ridge Museum?
Sure, thanks. So we are open right now Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday from 9 to 5. So closed Tuesday and Wednesday. We have cupola tours that run throughout the day. When you come and visit, we ask that you wear masks and stay 6 feet apart. But otherwise, the building is open. We're taking great pains to make sure everything is clean and sanitized as you come through here. So it's you can come in and tour the whole building. The whole building is open. Another thing that I will point out, if you're far away, one thing that we just launched this week is a virtual tour of the room in which I am standing. And maybe we can post that in the comments as well. We have a 360-degree image of this room. And we have a program that allows you to zoom in on different things and hear some of the voices of people who are associated with the Seminary Hospital, including Franklin Pratt, and zoom in on some of the exhibits. So that's a great new thing that we're embarking on, and no better place to start during Women's History Month than the nurses experience. So if you are far afield or don't feel comfortable coming here, you can still see this area from your own home.
Excellent, an awesome program. You'll find a link to the Seminary Ridge's website in the comments section, specifically linked to their membership page. With all of that being said, thank you so much, Pete, for coming on today, and
thank you
for joining us and sharing those incredible stories.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for watching.
All right, and if you've enjoyed today's program and you haven't yet liked this video, go up and click that like button up there. Go click it. Go click it. That helps more people to see the video. Share the video. This video will also be on YouTube as well. So if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the museum's channel, National Museum of Civil War Medicine, over on YouTube. You can find this video as well as other videos that we've recorded with Pete and other members of the staff at the Seminary Ridge Museum in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. You can also support both of our institutions by becoming a member of our museums. You can directly support and sustain our institutions, as well as get cool perks as well as a result of supporting us. So thank you all so much for tuning in today. Thank you, Pete, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.